We often believe that resistance is strength. We are told that to conquer life's challenges, we must fight harder, push further, and bend the world to our will. This belief is ingrained in how we approach almost everything from relationships to work, from personal goals to emotional struggles. When something isn't going our way, our instinct is to resist, to tighten our grip, to try to force an outcome. And yet, the more tightly we hold on, the more life seems to slip through our fingers. Why is this? Why does resistance so often lead to more suffering, to more complexity, to more chaos? To understand this dynamic, we must first look at the nature of resistance itself. Resistance is, at its core, an act of opposition. It is a rejection of what is. When we resist, we are saying, "This should not be happening. This is wrong. This is not how things are supposed to be." But here's the problem. The world does not conform to our ideas of how it should be. Reality simply is. It unfolds as it does, indifferent to our beliefs, our preferences, and our plans. When we resist reality, we are not changing it. We are merely exhausting ourselves by fighting against something that is far larger and more powerful than we are.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
This is the essence of the Taoist principle of Wu Wei, often translated as non-resistance or effortless action. Wu Wei does not mean passivity or inaction. It means aligning ourselves with the natural flow of life instead of opposing it. It means recognizing that there is a rhythm, a harmony, to the way the universe operates, and that our attempts to fight against this rhythm only create more friction, more tension, more pain. The harder we push, the harder life pushes back. But why do we resist in the first place? What is it in us that feels so compelled to fight against the natural flow of things? Perhaps it is fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of change. Resistance often comes from a place of insecurity, a belief that if we do not hold on tightly, everything will fall apart. We resist because we believe that letting go means giving up, and giving up means failure. But this belief is flawed. Letting go is not the same as giving up. Letting go is the act of releasing our need to control what cannot be controlled. It is an act of trust not in some external force, but in the inherent wisdom of life itself. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The more we resist, the worse things tend to get. And think about a heated argument. The more you try to force your point, the more the other person digs in their heels. The harder you try to control another person, the more they rebel, or think about stress and anxiety. The more you resist your feelings, the more they seem to grow, tightening their grip on you. Resistance creates a feedback loop. The energy you put into fighting something feeds it, giving it more power over you. But what happens when you stop resisting? What happens when you let go of the need to fight and simply allow things to be as they are? Often you'll find that the situation softens and the tension dissolves. The thing you were trying so hard to control no longer feels like a threat. This is not because the external circumstances have magically changed, but because your relationship to them has changed. By letting go of resistance, you create space for clarity, for understanding, for solutions to emerge naturally. Let's think about water. Water is one of the most potent symbols in Taoist philosophy because it embodies the principle of non-resistance so perfectly. Water does not fight obstacles, it flows around them. It does not resist, it adapts. And yet, water is incredibly powerful. Over time, it can wear down even the hardest stone. Its power lies not in force, but in its ability to yield, to move in harmony with the natural contours of its environment. What if we could approach life in the same way? Now, you might ask, does this mean we should never resist? Should we just accept every injustice, every hardship, every setback without question? Of course not. Non-resistance is not about passivity or apathy. It is about discernment. It is about knowing when to act and when to let go. There are times when action is necessary, when standing up for what is right requires effort and courage. But even in these moments, resistance in the form of anger, frustration, or rigidity often works against us. True strength lies in the ability to act without being consumed by resistance, to move forward without being weighed down by the need to fight. This brings us to a deeper question. How much of our suffering is self-inflicted? How often do we create our own pain by resisting what simply is? Imagine holding a rope that is pulling you in a direction you don't want to go. The harder you pull back, the more the rope burns your hands. But if you let go, the pain stops. The situation may not immediately resolve, but the struggle, the part that is within your control, ends. How often do we cling to that rope, convinced that if we just pull harder, we can make reality bend to our will? And how much unnecessary suffering do we endure as a result? Letting go is not easy. It requires us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world. It requires us to accept that we are not in control, that life is unpredictable, that uncertainty is an inherent part of existence. But in this acceptance, there is freedom. When we stop resisting, we free up the energy we were using to fight reality. We can redirect that energy towards something more productive, more meaningful, more aligned with the natural flow of life. Here's a practical example. Think about stress. Stress is often a result of resistance, a refusal to accept the present moment as it is. We stress because we want things to be different, because we are trying to control outcomes that are beyond our control. But what happens when we let go of that resistance? When we accept that we cannot control everything, that uncertainty is a part of life, the stress begins to dissipate. We may still face challenges, but we are no longer adding to our burden by resisting them. Let's also consider relationships. How often do conflicts arise because we are trying to change someone else, to make them conform to our expectations? The more we push, the more they resist. But when we let go of the need to control, when we accept people as they are, something shifts. The relationship becomes less strained, more open, more authentic. This does not mean we have to tolerate harmful behavior, but it does mean recognizing that resistance often creates more problems than it solves. At this point, the real question becomes, what would it look like to live a life of non-resistance? What would it feel like to move through the world with the fluidity of water, to adapt rather than oppose, to trust rather than fight? This is not an abstract idea. It is a practice, a way of being that can be cultivated through mindfulness, through self-awareness, through a willingness to let go of the need to control. And as we cultivate this practice, we may find that life becomes less of a battle and more of a dance, one in which we are not struggling against the rhythm, but moving in harmony with it. When we hear the phrase letting go, it often feels like an impossible task. Letting go of what, exactly? The problem, the anger, the fear, the desire for control. To let go feels like surrender, and surrender feels like defeat. Yet what we fail to see is that clinging to resistance is not strength, it is self-sabotage. It ties us into knots, blinds us to solutions, and traps us in cycles of frustration and despair. The power of non-resistance lies not in giving up, but in stepping back and allowing clarity to emerge from the chaos. In this way, letting go is not an act of weakness, but one of profound wisdom. To truly grasp the art of letting go, we must first understand what happens when we hold on too tightly. Resistance is, at its core, a refusal to accept what is. Whether it's a situation we don't like, an emotion we don't want to feel, or a person we wish were different, resistance keeps us locked in conflict with reality. And the more we resist, the more entrenched the problem becomes. It's like quicksand. The harder you struggle, the deeper you sink. Why does this happen? Because resistance feeds the very thing we are trying to escape. Our energy, our focus, our emotional intensity, all of it strengthens the grip of the problem. Think about worry. When we worry, we are resisting uncertainty. We are trying to control outcomes, to anticipate every possible scenario, to protect ourselves from the unknown. But worry doesn't solve problems, it amplifies them. It creates a storm of anxiety that clouds our judgment and drains our energy. The more we resist uncertainty, the more overwhelmed we feel. Letting go of worry doesn't mean ignoring problems, it means accepting that uncertainty is a natural part of life and trusting that we can handle whatever comes our way. But the same principle applies to emotions. When we resist painful feelings, whether it's sadness, anger, fear, or shame, we only intensify them. We try to push them away, to suppress them, to distract ourselves from them, but they grow louder and more insistent. Why? Because emotions are not meant to be fought, they are meant to be felt. They are signals, messages from within, telling us something important about our inner world. When we resist these messages, we block the flow of emotional energy, creating tension and discomfort. But when we allow ourselves to feel without judgment, the emotions begin to move, to shift, to transform. What we resist persists, what we accept dissolves. Now let's look at non-resistance in action. Imagine you are in a difficult conversation with someone who is being defensive or confrontational. Your instinct might be to push back, to argue your point, to try to force them to see things your way. But this often escalates the conflict, creating more tension and less understanding. Non-resistance, in this case, might look like listening instead of arguing, staying calm instead of reacting, and allowing the other person's emotions to run their course without fueling the fire. By stepping out of the cycle of resistance, you create space for the conversation to shift, for understanding to emerge. Non-resistance is not about passively accepting everything that happens to you. It is about choosing where to direct your energy. Resistance wastes energy by focusing on what you cannot change. Non-resistance redirects that energy toward what you can change: your perspective, your actions, your inner state. For example, if you lose a job, resisting the reality of that loss will only prolong your suffering. But truly accepting it allows you to focus on what comes next. It frees you to explore new opportunities, to adapt, to grow. This is the paradox of non-resistance. By letting go, we gain control not over the external world, but over ourselves. And when we are in control of ourselves, we are far better equipped to navigate the challenges of life. Letting go does not mean doing nothing. It means doing what needs to be done without being weighed down by unnecessary struggle. It means acting with clarity, with focus, with intention, rather than reacting out of fear, anger, or frustration. But how do we practice letting go in a world that constantly demands our attention, our effort, our control? The first step is awareness. We must become aware of the ways in which we resist, whether it's through worry, anger, denial, or control. What are the situations in your life where you feel the most tension, the most frustration, the most struggle? These are the areas where resistance is at work. Once you identify them, ask yourself, what would happen if I stopped resisting? Not in the sense of giving up, but in the sense of allowing things to be as they are, even if only for a moment. The second step is acceptance. Acceptance does not mean approval. It does not mean you have to like what is happening or agree with it. It simply means acknowledging reality as it is, without judgment, without wishing it were different. This can be incredibly difficult, especially in situations of pain or injustice. But acceptance is not about condoning what is wrong, it is about freeing yourself from the unnecessary suffering that comes from resisting what you cannot change. Acceptance creates the mental and emotional space necessary for clarity, for action, for healing. The third step is trust. Trust is perhaps the hardest part of letting go because it requires us to release our need for control. It requires us to believe that life has an inherent wisdom, that things unfold as they should, even when we don't understand how or why. This does not mean we become passive or fatalistic. It means we act with intention while trusting the process. It means we do our part and let go of the rest. Let's consider a simple but profound example: breathing. When you are stressed or anxious, your breath becomes shallow, tight, forced. But what happens when you let go, when you stop trying to control your breath and simply allow it to flow naturally? Your body relaxes, your mind clears, the tension eases. Life is like this. The more we try to control every aspect of it, the more we create stress and tension. But when we let go, when we allow the natural flow of life to carry us, we find a sense of ease, of clarity, of peace. The art of letting go is not something we master overnight. It is a practice, a way of being that we cultivate over time. It requires patience, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront the fears and insecurities that fuel our resistance. But the rewards are profound. When we stop resisting, we stop adding unnecessary suffering to our lives. We begin to see challenges not as enemies to be defeated, but as opportunities to grow. We begin to experience life not as a battle to be fought, but as a journey to be embraced. So, here's the question we must ask ourselves: how much of our energy are we wasting on resistance? What would our lives look like if we let go of the need to control what cannot be controlled? What would it feel like to move through the world with the fluidity of water, to face challenges with grace rather than struggle, to trust that life will unfold as it should? The answers to these questions are not theoretical. They are practical, tangible, and deeply transformative. And the moment we begin to live them, we discover that the chaos we once fought against has been replaced by a profound sense of clarity and peace.